What's up everybody? In this video we're going to talk about the HEX liquidity and explain why people think it's a problem, and then kind of dispel some myths about it that people might not really realize. So stick around till the end because I'm going to teach you methods to do all this stuff yourself and do real chain analysis to prove whether or not HEX really does have enough liquidity or if it really doesn't. So at the end you can decide for yourself, but I'm going to walk through teaching you how to actually view HEX's liquidity on chain. And as we all know, blockchain data cannot be fake. So let's get right into it. What is the price today? About 13.3 cents. It's a great price chart, and people always talk about how, well, if you buy HEX, you'll never be able to sell it. You'll just dump the price to zero if you ever try to sell. There was some guy, Alex Launders or something. It doesn't matter his name. But that was the big problem he had, and that's a problem that a lot of people with HEX think that they know. But when they say it, they don't really realize what they're saying, and they're often not able to back that up with any real data. So I'm going to show you guys real data. And I mean, this price chart is real data of people buying and selling, right? It's not bot trading, it's not wash trading, and we'll get into why in a minute. You can actually see every individual that's actually doing this trading. You can see it with your own eyes. So the first real kind of easy way to do it is you go to Twitter, right? Twitter.com and follow WhaleHex at WhaleHex. Okay. This is a HEX whale bot that some really smart guy actually invented to basically just trigger you on Twitter and let you know and give you an alert whenever there's a really big buy, a really big sell, a really big stake, a really big end stake, even a really big sacrifice. It even tells you like the total value locked, which I think now is upwards of $7.7 billion. But this is a really good account to follow. I highly recommend you all go follow this right now if you're not already. And you could just actually filter. Let's go up here and we'll filter by WhaleHex with the word sold. So every time this Twitter bot said that somebody sold. Well, right here you can see about $250,000 USD sell, about a $238,000 sell. Down here, 263,000, 201,000 sold, 297,000 sold. $250,000 sold, 225, 400,000 sold, $250,000 sold, $500,000 sold, and it goes on, guys. This is only the recent transactions in like the past week, it looks like. So you can scroll yourself and see people actually selling. You can click into the actual Ethereum or etherscan.io transaction and see when they sold, how much they sold. I mean, this is blockchain data that you're looking at right here, guys. You might have to do some research to understand it if you're brand new to blockchain, but this is a transaction hash of somebody selling their tokens and getting, $250,000 for that. So if that's not enough liquidity for you to sell into, then, maybe you're too big of a whale and you don't want to touch it yet. But as we could see, all that selling action was able to happen. And obviously there's buying action on the other side, and people sell and buy all day long, and it creates a chart like this. It's a pretty good looking chart. So people are able to sell in HEX. That's my point. That's one way to check. Now, another way to check is we can go to nomics.com, and let me just kind of explain. Nomics.com is a coin ranking site that actually shows you transparent HEX data. That's nomics.com. I'm a big fan of it. I suggest you check it out for all of your accurate HEX, price statistics and things like that. We can scroll down and see where HEX is being traded on down here in the volume category. We can see that the volume doesn't really matter too much. You can't make money on volume. Volume is just an indicator of where the activity happens. So right now, we can see that on Uniswap V2 and V3, that's about 58% of the volume taking place on Uniswap V1, V2, and V3. Right? So that's over half the volume, about 60% almost, on transparent, decentralized exchanges. Now, why does this matter? Let's talk about decentralized versus centralized exchanges. You can see here that Bitmart accounts for about 35% of the volume, quote unquote volume, but I'm not going to even consider Bitmart in my conversation today because Bitmart is a centralized exchange, and centralized exchanges not only exit scam all the time and can get you wrecked, and I do not advise ever going to them, but they often fake their volume too with wash trading, which is just, bots trading back and forth to each other to give the illusion of a lot of volume there to get real people over there because they think, oh, this must be a trustworthy exchange because everybody's trading over here. In reality, it's not everybody trading over there. It's just a couple people trading and a lot of bots just trading, back and forth, little amounts. Buy $5, sell $5. Buy $100, sell $100. They do this because it mimics real activity. And basically a centralized exchange is like a black box. The money goes in and you don't really know where it's going after that. A decentralized exchange is important to use because you hold your own private keys and you hold your own money and you get to actually look at the blockchain and see real people buying and trading. It's really hard to fake volume on a centralized exchange because it costs money to fake, right? If you wanted to fake volume, you'd have to use real money. And you have to show up on the blockchain, and then there's gas costs, right? So because it costs, $4 or $5 per transaction, it's kind of expensive to just trade back and forth with yourself. You would bleed out very quickly if you were just trading back and forth with yourself, right? So that's why I prefer DEXs, decentralized exchanges, DEXs. If you're new to crypto, don't get sucked into centralized exchanges. I highly recommend Uniswap v2. Uniswap v3 is even better. And we'll get right into why. So like I mentioned in my last video, the total liquidity of coins available on the market is always far less than the total supply of the coin in existence, right? So the total liquidity that's actually on exchanges is always going to be far lower, but especially true in the early days of the coin. And again, HEX is only 20 months old, so not even 2 years old. And we can make a comparison to Bitcoin at that young age of 2 right now. Obviously today Bitcoin is much more liquid than HEX because it's the oldest coin and the most mature. I mean, Bitcoin is 12 years old. It's more liquid than any other coin on the market. Any other coin, right? It's the most liquid because it's been around for so long. And now, institutions are getting in and things like that. So these kind of giant players need that big liquidity. But when you're in retail, when you're just people like you and me off the street, you don't really care about that high liquidity because it's more than enough to have smaller amounts in those early stages. And that's actually an opportunity for you to buy and sell, whatever you want to do before the big players get in. So think of it as an opportunity. But let's, again, do a comparison to Bitcoin. This is a chart from Glassnode.com. Glassnode.com does a really good job of accumulating various Bitcoin data, on-chain data. So real blockchain data that can't be faked. Here I moved it to a logarithmic price scale because some of the metrics were a little bit funky. So I moved the price to the log scale and the metric to the log scale. And what you're looking at is the total balances on all exchanges for Bitcoin, right? And then the price is in gray. But what's important to look at is the gold line or the orange line. That's the balance of Bitcoin that's actually liquid on exchanges. And we're going to go back in time to year 2 of Bitcoin's existence, right? So when Bitcoin was 2 years old, again, Bitcoin came out on about 2010, right? So let's go to January 2012. And we'll see, when Bitcoin was about 2 years old, as opposed to when HEX was about 2 years old. When Bitcoin was 2 years old on January 2012, looks like we had about 880 Bitcoin available between all exchanges, right? And that's between every exchange on the market. So there was really only one exchange at the time, Mt. Gox. And so a lot of the Bitcoin was being traded on there. So we've got 880 right there. Let's round that up to 900 just for a nice even number. And let's figure out, so how much Bitcoin was there actually total circulating Bitcoin? Well, we can go over to blockchain.com and we could find the actual total circulating Bitcoin supply at that same time. So let's go to January 2012. The closest we can get to January 1st is January 3rd. It's about 8 million, right? 8.02 million, as you can see on the screen here. So there were 8.02 million Bitcoin in circulation and only about 900 Bitcoin available on exchange. So let's do some math. 900 Bitcoin on exchange divided by 8 million Bitcoin that existed, that were minted at the time. That leaves you about, let's multiply that by 100 to get the percentage. That's about 0.01% of Bitcoin that was available on exchanges at year 2 of Bitcoin. Now, obviously that metric gets more and more higher over time to where we're at today. We have, millions of Bitcoin on exchange, but in a product's infancy, when it's very nascent and new, you have a lot less liquidity than you have total supply. And that grows exponentially. That ratio, if you plotted that as a ratio, grows exponentially along with the price growth, right? So that's just proof. And even today, 78% of the Bitcoin supply is not liquid, which means only 22% is available on exchange. And that's after 12 years, guys. And this was as of, December 29th, 2020. So relatively recent. You can see over here, the blue part of the chart is the illiquid supply. Orange and red are liquid. right? So you could see this is about 2012 right here. Look at how much more blue there was than orange and red. Now, I'm not able to get that chart here because I haven't paid for the Glassnode service yet, but if I was able to share the chart, I would. But you could see it right here on the article here, right? So this is Bitcoin data. Let's hop over to look at Uniswap data. So Uniswap has 3 versions, V1, V2, V3. The primary place where HEX is traded is Uniswap V2 and Uniswap V3. So let's get some of our own data. And so I'll show you, if you go to v2.info.uniswap.org, you can find all of the V2 data. And then if you go to info.uniswap.org, you can go to find out all the V3 data. So let's do V2. Again, the top liquidity pairings for HEX are HEX USDC and HEX ETH, right? These are what mostly people trade in, okay? So let's look at the HEX USDC pair. We could see there's still 53,127,000 HEX on V2 in the USDC pool. Now on the ETH pool, on the other hand, we've got 10,275,000 HEX. So that gives us about 63 million total so far. Now let's hop over to V3. So if we go to info.uniswap.org, these are the latest and greatest from V3. Again, we can see that the top 2 pairs are USDC and ETH. Let's ignore all the other pairs for now because they're kind of negligible. I mean, they don't even have $500,000 in them yet. So let's just look at HEX USDC on V3. We can see that there's 32.5 million there. And on the HEX ETH pair on V3, we've got about 6.7 million on there. Now let's add all these numbers up and do some math. So that equals 102 million, approximately 102 million HEX on exchange today. And remember, there's about 600 billion, roughly 600 billion coins in existence. So let's divide this by 600 billion, which is a big number. And we will get this number times 100 to get a percentage. That's about 0.01%. 0.017% of all HEX is available liquid, and that's as opposed to 0.01125%, right? 0.01125%. So there's actually more, a little bit more HEX liquid at this time in HEX's existence relative to the total circulating supply, or just the total supply, let's say. So when we compare it to Bitcoin, this is actually a bigger number, right? And I'm sure that this is going to get higher over time as HEX becomes more mainstream, as we get an actual, real USD on-ramp, when we get the Grayscale-like entity. There's a lot of cool stuff coming up for HEX. So follow the news and be sure to stay updated. But you can see those 2 numbers are very similar, and the one for HEX is even higher. So people complain about that, and they don't really realize, I think, what they're saying a lot of times. I mean, no liquidity in HEX. I mean, look at HEX compared to all these other coins, right? This is the leaderboard of liquidity for all ERC20 tokens on Uniswap. We've got all the ones you've seen before, some familiar faces, and then we've got HEX at number 24. So HEX is in the top 30 for liquidity on Uniswap. So people saying it doesn't have enough, well, how much is enough, right? I mean, HEX has more than Aave, more than Matic, more than Yearn. Again, these might be traded on other dexes too, but Uniswap is the premier dex that everybody goes to. And HEX has more liquidity on Uniswap V3 than a lot of other well-known tokens, right? So it's not that low. 24 is not that low, and it's not like you want to be the highest anyway. The higher the liquidity is, the harder it is to move the price up. It takes more economic energy to move the price up. So if HEX was number 1, you might not see as much price movement. So part of the volatility is part of the game, right? It's a feature, not a bug. And the more volatile something is early on, the higher the price can appreciate, and the faster the price can appreciate. But again, we can compare HEX to all these other tokens, and it really doesn't give me any cause for concern, personally. But again, you make your own decisions. And now, if we want to explore and go to hex.com/trading, this is on the actual hex.com website. If for whatever reason you don't want to use Uniswap, I do not recommend using centralized exchanges. I really, really don't. But we can scroll down to the bottom here and see all these other places you can trade HEX. YoBit, HitBTC, Hotbit, Bitcoin.com, Bidesk. There's so many other exchanges, right? So people saying, oh, there's no way to trade it, no way to sell it. Well, I've got 22 other centralized exchanges that you could trade it at right now. I just know that Uniswap is the best one, and as we saw over here, it's where all the people are trading, right? But if you want to go to Bitmart and go trade on Bitmart, be my guest. Again, I really do not advise that though. I mean, look, it even says on the website, centralized exchanges can be risky. HEX encourages trading on dexes and holding your own private keys. This is very important. It even says some exchanges turn out to be scams. Okay, so you might lose all your money. It's always a big risk. To make a final point, I want to talk about, we saw the Twitter bot already, but if you want to get even more in depth, you can go to hex.vision. That's HEX.vision. And you can actually look up the liquidity yourself. So there's a dashboard on this Cabana website for some really cool in-depth stats. These are really hardcore stats, so it's a little advanced, but you can go here and click on the Uniswap V2 tab, and they haven't even added a V3 tab yet. So this is still looking at old V2 data, and we can filter by people that are buying and selling, anywhere from 500,000 HEX to 60 million HEX. That's what I set the filter at. And we can see on Uniswap V2 only, again, not counting V3, we've got all these different buys and sells. 117,000 sell, $252 sell, $70,000 sell, $216 sell, $239 sell, $83,000 sell, $176,000 sell. So you need to ask yourself, all these people are buying and selling with the price chart being where it's at, staying intact and not crashing to zero. How much do you really need to sell as a retail investor? I know I'm not making trades for this kind of money, but I do know that if I needed to, for some reason, sell, $500,000 worth of HEX, I mean, it might make a dent in the chart. We might get some slippage and it might go down, price might go down, but it won't nearly destroy HEX the way some people claim that it might. I mean, look at all these sells, guys. 75K, 109K, 246K, all these sells. And there are 40, this is page 1 of 145. So you can keep flipping through pages, keep seeing all this. This is just like a Ferrari here, a Lamborghini here, a Ferrari here. This is more than I think the average investor like you and me would even be selling at any one time, right? So this is a game where people are already being able to cash out. And obviously more people are buying than selling because the price is still going way up. Let me just give you one more real world social proof. So I'm going to prove to you that people are actually able to buy and sell because there's an entire page on hex.com called the Testimonials page. Go to hex.com/testimonials and look at all these people that felt the need to make a video about how HEX changed their life. So are all these people just holding HEX? No, I would bet that a lot of these people had sold some HEX and were able to pay for their new lifestyles, right? That's what it's all about. Perpetual passive income, right? Look at all these people. These are real people. This guy's in front of a mansion right here. This guy bought a Lamborghini. This guy bought a real house, bought with HEX. I mean, I can actually show you some other stuff. This is a really awesome account that you should go follow. It's called Hex Bought This, calling all Hexicans to tell people what they bought. This guy is helping people build water holes in Africa. This guy took a vacation. They took their mom to a vacation. This person bought a car. This person bought a new Harley, fully paid off. This person bought a new car. A lot of cars in here. This person bought a camper. This person bought a whole garage full of Lamborghinis and stuff. New Rolex, brand new camera, new vacation, new McLaren, pretty awesome. New camper, new fully decked out camper for glamping. A couple of Rolexes right here. New Lamborghini, delicious seafood feast. Sometimes it's the little things. New Versace, new iWatch, new Galaxy Watch, I guess. New iPhone, new pool, new bunch of Rolexes, new Jeep, new truck. I mean, these are real people buying real things. New camper, new Audi, new Jeep, paid off a mortgage on my new Hamilton Island home. I mean, this account is only going to get bigger and bigger, and it is really, really cool. So again, the concept of liquidity is different than the total supply out there. And liquidity doesn't need to be the highest in the world. Especially for a young coin, liquidity needs to be high enough to have an efficient market of people buying and selling. And right now, as a final point, I'll just mention that HEX is the perfect market for retail right now. Retail investors mean regular people like you and me. So in HEX's early days, it didn't sell out to venture capitalists who you might think are a good thing, but in reality in crypto, they're often not very good. They're often referred to as vulture capitalists because they're often paid off a lot of the token early on, and then they just become a net seller. So they're just waiting around for the price to go up, for the liquidity to go up, and they become constant dumpers that just dump the price on your head, and they sell the price down. Vulture capitalists having all this money is not actually a good thing. If you get VCs with a lot of money, especially in the crypto game. I know in the real world they're not always that corrupt, but a lot of them in crypto just sell the price down at the first chance they can get. So the fact that HEX is primarily a retail game right now is actually an opportunity for people like you and me. And in the first couple years of HEX, this is a good thing. I mean, we're going to have a lot of cool stuff in the future, right? We're going to have a grayscale-like entity where we can actually trade ETNs to the traditional world to be able to buy HEX, but that won't even push the price down because they'll be buying ETNs, right? Not underlying spot HEX, the asset. In the future, maybe institutions will want to get in. Maybe Coinbase will buy in. Maybe institutions like JP Morgan will get in. But that's 10, 15 years away. And when that happens, that's when people like you and me are going to want to be selling, right? Because we are the people that are getting in early. So look at this relatively low liquidity as an opportunity. I mean, it's enough liquidity. It's more than enough liquidity for regular people to buy and sell. And it's actually a good thing that there's not enough liquidity for JP Morgan to come in, because it lets us play this game where we get to accumulate the wealth and we get to become the new whales. So HEX doesn't have enough liquidity. Well, compared to what, right? Compared to every other crypto, it's got pretty much an average amount of liquidity. It seems to be ranked 24 in liquidity on Uniswap. That's not bad at all. And again, the more liquidity you have, the harder it is for you to pump the price, and the more you need to rely on these institutions, which crypto is trying to get away from. The whole point of crypto was to get rid of middlemen. So begging for there to be more liquidity and begging for institutions to come in is the exact opposite of why crypto was invented. So enjoy the retail-friendly HEX market and enjoy looking some of these stats up for yourself. And hopefully in this video, you learned how to actually prove to yourself whether or not HEX has enough liquidity for you. So thanks, and I'll see you on the next video.